Gonzaga fans' worst fears may have come to fruition with Mario Saint-Supery suffering an apparent ankle injury during EuroBasket play on Saturday.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, the Players Era Festival plans to expand to 32 teams next year. We're going to talk about what that means for Gonzaga, what that also means for MTEs and college basketball at large to close out the show. Plus, we're going to take a look at a five-star forward who is set to visit Gonzaga in November, what game they're coming out to, and what it means for the Zags. All that coming up, but first, we got to talk about what we saw on Saturday afternoon between Spain and France in EuroBasket. For those of you who missed this, Mario Saint-Supery, Gonzaga's 19-year-old freshman guard from Spain, who is representing his home country at the 2025 EuroBasket event on Saturday in the first quarter of an exhibition game against France. So it didn't count. The event actually starts in earnest about 10 days from now. The first game for Spain is August 28th. Regardless, late in the first quarter of this game between Spain and France, Mario Saint-Supery was driving to the basket. He threw a lob up to a player on a pick and roll. It was a great play as it came together. Mario landed on his right foot and went down immediately. The footage is not particularly helpful in terms of being able to evaluate what happened at this time. He went down hard, immediately grabbed his ankle. The camera cut away. Later, they showed him being helped up by his teammates. Somewhat crucially, they did not show him put any weight on his ankle at the time. As he walked off the floor, he was completely holding it elevated. A lot of people have used that to indicate, oh, it could be much worse. And yeah, it's not good. You would feel better if he was putting a little weight on his ankle, but anybody who just suffered an ankle injury, who doesn't yet know the severity, who has two teammates around them with their arms up, is probably going to avoid putting weight on the ankle anyway. So I wouldn't read too much into that. I should say at this point, I am recording this on Sunday mid-afternoon. I waited a little longer than usual to see if we would get an update, but we haven't really heard much as of now. Obviously, by the time you're listening to this, it is possible there is a more concrete update on the severity of the ankle injury for Saint-Supery. If that's the case, of course, we will provide an update as soon as we do our next episode of Locked On Zags. But it's not a great sign for Gonzaga. The reporting that has come out since then, primarily from Spanish websites and through multiple attempts at Google Translate to kind of figure out what we know, what we don't know at this point, there's just not a lot. There's just not a lot of concrete information. There was a quote from the Spanish national team's coach who said that his ankle injury, quote, does not seem simple, which again is translated and also vague. I don't know what that means. Not necessarily bad, but also probably not good either. If it was simple, they would probably say, yeah, it's a simple sprain or it's a simple so-and-so, or he just rolled it really bad or whatever. But the fact that it's not simple, could it be a high ankle sprain, low ankle sprain? Could it be a break? I mean, we just, again, we don't know as of this recording the severity of the injury for Saint-Supery. My guess, regardless of the severity, unless it is very, very minor, which seems kind of unlikely, my guess is that Saint-Supery is not going to participate with Spain in the EuroBasket anymore, which is incredibly unfortunate for Mario. It's incredibly unfortunate for Spain, and it's really unfortunate for Gonzaga fans too. I mean, obviously, at this point, Gonzaga fans, you, me, many other people listening to the show or not listening to the show, just want him to be healthy for the season, and that concern would trump the feelings about him getting the opportunity to represent his country. But obviously, if he is able to return for Spain, that's a very good sign for his ability to be ready for Gonzaga's season. Ankle sprains vary wildly in severity. So trying to make a projection, we don't know if sprain is the official diagnosis. It is probably the most likely diagnosis because of what I just said. The the spread between a light ankle sprain and a severe ankle sprain is massive. And so it kind of is an all-encompassing term for what is the likely outcome for this injury for Saint-Supery. But the average ankle sprain recovery time in terms of being fully 100% back on the floor for game action is about 6 to 8 weeks. The day of the injury, Saturday, August 16th, until Gonzaga's first game, November 3rd, is 11 weeks and 2 days. So in theory, a 6 to 8 week recovery window would mean Saint-Supery is at full strength by the time Gonzaga's season starts against Texas Southern on November 3rd in Spokane. But this is more complicated than that, for a lot of reasons that have already been discussed regarding Mario Saint-Supery. He has not spent very much time on campus. He has not been around his teammates. He has not been around his coaches. He has not been around the Spokane community. He has not been in the United States for very long. He was somebody that Gonzaga was known to be pursuing back in April, like shortly after the transfer portal window opened, but he actually didn't officially sign on to Gonzaga and come to Spokane until Hoop Fest weekend, which was the last weekend in June. And then not even a month later, he was already flying out to Spain after being added to the Spanish national team's roster for EuroBasket as an injury replacement. So he spent just a couple of weeks, I think around 3 weeks total in Spokane. And part of that time, the Zags were working out. They did have team drills and things like that. So he has some time where he has been around the coaches, been around his teammates, but very little. And even without the injury, the fact that he was going to be with the Spanish national team until mid-September meant that he wasn't going to have a ton of time to kind of get acclimated to Gonzaga's system, to what his role was going to be, and just kind of getting used to the United States and what college basketball is like compared to European basketball, and all of those things that tend to take international freshmen a long time to adjust to. And we've seen it even with the very best international freshmen that Gonzaga has had. Rui Hachimura looked completely lost as a freshman. Shema Karnowski was borderline unplayable as a freshman. Those are not the only two examples. Many others showed dramatic improvement after their first year as they kind of just got used to their new digs, their new surroundings, and the differences between, whatever level of basketball they played overseas compared to college basketball here in the United States. For Saint-Supery, that adjustment becomes even more complicated if he's not fully healthy and able to actually participate. All positions need actual 5-on-5 live action to really start to grasp it. But point guard, it's just crucial. You can explain a set, you can explain your role, like the reads, the actions, the things you're looking to do with the ball in your hands. But until you're doing it, and until you're doing it with players in front of you who are guarding you, who are trying to stop you, you're not really getting the full experience necessary to be able to function and contribute on the court. And Mario's not going to get those opportunities. And if he's injured, and first of all, if he's injured and unable to participate in EuroBasket for the rest of the time and they rule him out, I am curious if he will stay with the team or if he will come back to Spokane and rehab there. Not something we know at this point. Obviously, it depends on the severity of the injury, but I am curious what happens there. But either way, he's not getting that experience with his team. One thing we talked about with Mario, I think a week or two ago, is that Mark Few has indicated that he believes Saint-Supery is capable of playing both the 1 and the 2. Effectively, he is a combo guard. He's somebody that can play on or off the ball. We know Braden Smith, the Colgate transfer who redshirted last year behind Ryan Nembhard. We know he is going to step in and take over as the primary point guard for this team. That was never in debate. Saint-Supery was not expected to usurp Braden Smith at the 1. If anything, he was more likely to usurp Adam Miller, the Arizona State transfer, at the 2. And I think that that's even more likely now, because learning the offense, learning the point guard role in Gonzaga's offense, in the amount of time that Saint-Supery is going to have, potentially without the ability to be on the court in full 5-on-5 action until a few weeks before the season, is just very unlikely. But learning the 2-guard role, which is simpler, which is more similar to the role that he played last year for Ben Reza in Spain, seems a much more likely. What does that mean for Gonzaga? Well, it would likely mean that, again, Adam Miller's playing time would get cut a little bit. Probably cut into the playing time a little bit for Emmanuel Innocente and others as well. But I think the main question is, what does that do for Gonzaga's point guard position? Because Braden Smith, no point guard's playing 40 minutes a game, and Braden Smith's not going to play 37, 36 minutes a game like Ryan Nembhard did. At least I don't think he will. Now I'm starting to think maybe he might have to. But who is that backup point guard? On one hand, it could be Adam Miller, who just kind of slides over to the one when Smith's off the floor, and that way Mario can kind of play the two. But I also, my gut instinct here is that it's Jalen Warley. And that may seem odd, as Jalen Warley is 6'7" and, kind of more traditionally looks like and plays like a three, but Jalen Warley handled the ball a lot when he was at Florida State and has proven himself to be a capable facilitator. And I think having also spent a year on the bench, he's more familiar with what the point guard is asked to do in Gonzaga's system than somebody like Saint-Supery or Adam Miller or Tyon Grant-Foster, who I think would also be capable of playing the point guard role for this Gonzaga team if he were on campus. But as we're recording this, we still have not heard an update on Tyon Grant-Foster's waiver and eligibility for next season. So Grant-Foster's opportunity to kind of take the reins at point guard seems limited. And Mario Saint-Supery's now is potentially even more limited, if he is injured all the way until October. So I think you're looking at Jalen Warley as your backup point guard to begin the season, with Braden Smith, of course, handling the one. As of right now, I think the last point that I'll make on this topic here, if you're somebody who thinks, well, why does Mark Few allow the players to do this? Why are they participating in these events? So-and-so doesn't it, et cetera, whatever argument you might make there. I believe, and this is my opinion, not something I've heard from anybody around the program, but I believe that Mark Few and the staff are never, ever, 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 ever going to stop players from doing something like this for a couple of reasons. One, Gonzaga's international recruiting is so crucial to the program's success and such a vital part of how they have become who they have. And the reason that they are successful internationally is that they understand the importance of things like this. The first time a coach tries to recruit a player or recruits a player and then tries to bar them from participating in an international event that means a lot to that player is probably the last time they get a player from that country, potentially. And word travels pretty darn fast. Gonzaga has successfully navigated international recruiting in Asia, in Australia, in Europe, all across Europe, and just about every country you can think of that has significant basketball at the youth level. And Gonzaga's ability to do that is predicated on the fact that they know how much this kind of stuff matters to players. They know how important this is. And yeah, when they brought in Mario, he was not part of this roster. But when he got added to the roster as an injury replacement, there was, in my mind, no way they weren't going to let him do that. They probably were not thrilled. I'll be honest, they probably weren't. It wasn't something that they wanted to do, but how do you tell a 19-year-old kid he can't go represent his country at the highest stage in international competition because he signed on to play for your college team? College basketball matters more to me and to many of you listening than almost anything else. College basketball is how I make my money. It's how I feed my family. It dictates my mood. You can ask everybody who lives in my house about that. They will confirm that that is the case, but that's not the case for most players internationally. College basketball does not carry that same weight. And if you don't respect what they care about, you're going to struggle to recruit. So I do not think that Mark Few or Gonzaga should stop allowing players to do this. I do not think that they feel that that's something that they should do or will do going forward, but it is obviously the risk that these kinds of things carry. We'll have an update as soon as we know one about Mario Saint-Supery's health, about his ankle, about how it's going, about what it looks like for his season. We will talk about this very soon. Right now, as we're recording, we only know what we've been able to communicate at this point, but stay tuned because we will hopefully have an update on this soon. We're going to switch gears, though. We're going to talk recruiting for the 2026 class. The Zags have a consensus 5-star forward set to visit when they host Oklahoma at the Spokane Arena. We're going to talk about the team's pursuit of Cameron Holmes coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, if you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's working out, long days spent on campus, staying focused through your back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts. And that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. My go-to flavor for just about everything is black cherry, and the black cherry Drip Drop is outstanding. It's a game changer after a workout or just on those extra busy days. I always keep a few of them in my backpack. It saved me more than once from having that midday crash. And right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, pivoting away from our conversation around the right ankle of 19-year-old freshman guard Mario Saint-Supery to instead talk about a visit that we touched on a little bit last week as the news came out right before we recorded our last episode of the week last week, but that we wanted to kind of explore a little bit more here because he's a guy we haven't had a chance to talk about as much as perhaps we should, considering he's one of the few 5-star prospects that Gonzaga is pursuing in this 2026 class. That would be Cameron Holmes. Cameron Holmes, 5-star, 6'6" small forward from Goodyear, Arizona, has set an official visit to come to Spokane starting November 7th. That means he will be in Spokane for Gonzaga's second game of the season. At least we expect it to be the second game of the season against Oklahoma at the Spokane Arena on November 8th. So that's the game that Cameron Holmes will be in the house to watch. He is the 5th known visitor in the sense that we know the specific date that Cameron Holmes is going to be on campus. There are 8 reported visitors for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs in the 2026 class over the next couple of months. 3 of them, we don't have official dates on when they're going to visit, but there are 5 that we do. We're going to talk about them in a second. In terms of Holmes, like we said, 6'6" small forward, a lefty from Arizona. He's the 24th ranked player in the 2026 class, according to 247 Sports' class rankings. Other sites have him a little bit lower, although fairly similar, 30th in the latest update from On3/Rivals, and then ESPN has him 34th in their class. So he's a consensus 25, 35 ranked prospect in that group. Like I said, he is 5-star in the consensus rankings. Some of the other individual spots have him as a 4-star. This is one of 6 visits that Cameron Holmes is planning to take. He has set 6 official visits, spread them out over 3+ months. He has taken his time. We've talked extensively throughout the last few weeks on Locked On Zags about how the players in this 2026 class are seemingly taking their time on the recruiting trail more than we're used to seeing, in part just because the NIL and the House settlement have kind of changed the dynamic pretty significantly for them. But Holmes has a very great group of teams that he is planning to visit, starting with Illinois, Brad Underwood's club on September 12th. Then he's going to go out to Chapel Hill to take in North Carolina on September 19th. And then actually he's going to Gonzaga's opponent, Oklahoma, on October 3rd. So we'll have already visited with Porter Moser and the Sooners before taking in that game on November 8th. Then on Halloween, he's going to be in Austin, Texas with the Longhorns. And then there's a bit of a gap after his visit to Spokane for about a month before he goes to Arizona on December 5th. Obviously, he is from Arizona, so that is a much quicker trip for Cameron Holmes to go take in Tommy Lloyd and the Wildcats. Cameron Holmes is the younger brother of former All-American and current Denver Nuggets forward Day'Ron Holmes. Day'Ron Holmes spent 3 years at Dayton with the Flyers and was an All-American his junior year before he went in the first round of the NBA draft to those Denver Nuggets. He missed his entire rookie season with an injury, so he actually has not made his NBA debut yet, but was an incredibly productive high school player. And Cameron's similar in a lot of ways. He's a little bit smaller, since that Day'Ron was, I think, 6'8", 6'9", and Cameron is just 6'6", but they both have huge wingspans. Cameron measures out at about 6'9" for his wingspan. He's really tough. He's really physical. He's got a lot of defensive versatility. He's been able to guard the 3s, 4s, 5s. I think there's a reasonable chance he has the athleticism to even guard 2s potentially. Although I think 5s at the collegiate level might be a little bit tough. But the point is he's going to have that defensive versatility because of his physicality. Those are 2 words easy to trip over there. But I think similar to a lot of other players Gonzaga is pursuing, including Hurley Brutus, including Bo Ogden, including a few others, Luca Foster, part of the reason that Gonzaga has gotten really invested in Holmes' recruitment is his ability to knock down 3-point shots really escalated in the last few months on the summer circuit. He was a good athletic wing who loved getting downhill, who loved using his physicality to out-athlete people and get to the rim and score that way. But he didn't show a ton of finesse outside of that. And then this last year or so on the summer circuit, the 3-point shot looked much, much better. And now that we've seen that more complete offensive game, you see a player who has defensive switchability and versatility on that end, who's good with the ball in his hands, who can get downhill and get to the rim, but now also has a developing outside shot That is a close to complete package. It's the reason he's risen up the ranks. It's the reason he is now considered a 5-star prospect. And the Zags have made Cameron Holmes a pretty big priority for this program. And we've talked about it a few times already on the show. Gonzaga's really going after those athletic wing types. I think they know that those players are really hard to find in the transfer portal. If you're a small forward who was productive at any level of Division I basketball, whether it was in the MEAC or the SEC, if you are in the transfer portal and you are an athletic player between 6'5" and 6'9", you are commanding huge amounts of money. And Gonzaga went after some of those players early in the transfer portal season and got outpriced immediately. They still ultimately landed a very good player in Tyron Grant Foster, assuming his eligibility comes together. But now Gonzaga's like, well, why don't we get these kids and develop them? Why don't we get them as freshmen when maybe other programs are not as willing to spend big money on freshmen? We can, because we don't have a football team that we have to spend $12 million on. So let's spend that money on high school kids and see if we can get them to come to campus and potentially either be one and dones if they're good enough, or try to convince them to stay for a year or 2 or 3 and develop that way. So again, Holmes is one of many visitors for Gonzaga this next couple of months, and what's going to be a critical time for Gonzaga's recruiting, one of the most critical times in the program's history, just in terms of the volume of talented players making their way to Spokane. It starts in just over a week, August 29th, when Ethan Harris from Camas, Washington will be on campus, 4-star power forward. Then a few weeks later, J-Rob Croy, a combo guard, will be on campus September 12th. And then October 3rd, 4th, 5th, craziness in the Kennel weekend. The Zags will have a pair of 4-stars in center Sam Funches and small forward Hurley Brutus. And then a month later is when we have Cameron Holmes coming to campus on November 7th. Those are the 5 locked in with dates. But then we have 3 other players who have indicated they are planning to visit Gonzaga, but just have not indicated the dates. One of them is Tyron Stokes, the number 1 ranked player in the 2026 class. He is Louisville, Kentucky, bunch of other really great programs are heavily involved here. He has said he's visiting Gonzaga, but is not revealing the dates of his visits because of the amount of people who crowded him at the airport the first time he announced a visit. He said, I don't want that anymore. So no dates coming out for Stokes. Baba Aladatoon, who was in the 2027 class, but has reclassified to 2026, a 6'9", very slim, but very talented scoring forward. He has said he's visiting in October, but has not given a firm date. And then Gonzaga is also pursuing point guard Ikenna Alozie, top 30 prospect in the class, who has listed Gonzaga in his top 8 and says he's planning to visit everybody in his top 8, but has not set an official date to come out to Spokane just yet. Well, pivoting once more, folks, the Players Era Festival, which Gonzaga is committed to not only this year, but also in 2026 and 2027, is set to become a 32-team event next year. What does that mean for Gonzaga, and what does that mean for MTEs as a whole? We got all that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, do you ever decide at the last minute you want to head out to a ball game with your friends or your family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize, I don't want to be home. I want to be out in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all the stress. And with the money that you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group of friends to come with you. Gametime makes all of that possible because prices on the app, they actually drop the closer that you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is also the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming game. The Mariners, they're back at home this upcoming weekend hosting the A's. I almost said the Oakland A's, the Sacramento A's coming to Seattle. Tickets on Friday in section 331, which, folks, that's my favorite section in all of T-Mobile Park, right above home plate. Perfect view of the entire field. You can get those tickets for $27 a piece. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are closing out the show with another piece of news that came last week that I wanted to talk about here, the Players Era Festival, which is, of course, the new NIL-focused event taking place over Feast Week in late November every year. It was the first year last year. This is going to be the second year of this event. has already committed to being a 32-team event in 2026, which is bonkers. This thing's going to be huge. Per John Rothstein, the Players Era Festival is officially committed to a 32-team event in 2026, per event founder and CEO Seth Berger. Again, Gonzaga agreed to be in this thing for a couple of years. They're facing this year, they already know the first two games. They're facing both Alabama and Maryland on the Monday and Tuesday of Feast Week. They will have a third game on Wednesday, but it depends on how they do in those first two games to determine who they will be playing and when they will be playing and whether they will be playing for a championship or not on that Wednesday game. Every team in this event, as a reminder, has been promised $1 million in NIL funds. That money it's yours, it's locked in, it's done. It is handed to you as soon as you participate in the event. If you win said event, your team also gets an additional $1 million. So for Gonzaga, this event has an opportunity to net them $2 million in NIL funds, but will at least net them $1 million guaranteed. And after the house settlement came to fruition and everything with that, they already worked closely with the people who are putting on the NIL or the Players Era Festival to make sure that everything was going to be above board for that. So for teams that are not at the $20.5 million threshold, which is what we assume for Gonzaga, the money that they get from this will just go into their pool. So in theory, Gonzaga will not do this, but you are allowed to spend that $20.5 million on any of your student athletes. So that money will go into a pool for Gonzaga, and they will be able to allocate it however they wish. If you are a program that is already at the $20.5 million limit, let's say Michigan, for example, as they're participating in the event, that money will then be funneled through the third-party NIL situation, and the group that is now monitoring those events has already said, like, yeah, this is fine. Like, we're going to let this through. It's not going to be an issue for them. So, once you got the go-ahead there, and once they got the funding, I understand every team. And I think a quote from when this event first started coming together before last season, a quote from a coach who remained anonymous basically said, we would play in the parking lot of the Mandalay Bay if it's going to get us $1 million. And sure, I appreciate the honesty. Why wouldn't you? Like, why, if you are going to get invited to a event and you're planning to play in an MTE, you're planning to participate in 3 games in 3 days, and you want to compete against good teams, and one event is offering you $1 million, whether you win a game or not, and the other event is not, why wouldn't you choose the event that's offering you more money? Yeah, it's more fun to go to the Battle for Atlantis. It's more fun to go to the Bahamas. No doubt. It's more fun to go to Hawaii than Las Vegas. But they're not giving you $1 million to go there. They're not giving you $1 million to go to Maui and lose. Danny Hurley would have loved to get $1 million and lose when he went down to Maui last year and got smoked in 3 games. But he didn't even get $1 million for it. Gonzaga's going to get $1 million whether they beat Alabama and Maryland or not. And that's a pretty awesome deal. So I'm not surprised that this event is expanding all the way to 32 teams. It's not good news for those other events because this year the event is only 18 teams. And here are the fields in the Battle for Atlantis and Maui. Battle for Atlantis: Virginia Tech, St. Mary's, Vanderbilt, South Florida, VCU, Colorado State, Western Kentucky, and Wichita State. And folks, you should have known from the minute I said Virginia Tech first that was not going to be a good field of college basketball teams. 2 of those 8 teams are Power 4. Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech, not exactly basketball powerhouses. St. Mary's is the best team on this group, and it's not super close. It's no disrespect to Randy Bennett and the Gales. They typically would not be the best team headlining a Battle for Atlantis. The Maui Invitational is a little bit better. 5 of the 8 teams are Power 4 teams. That would be our Power 5 teams, Texas, USC, NC State, Arizona State, Seton Hall, Washington State, Boise, and Chaminade. And I say 5 of the 8, 7 of the 8, if you're counting Washington State and Boise State as Power teams, Power 6 teams starting next year when they are in of course, the Pac-12. But regardless, that's not a great field either. Like, there's some power conference teams, but Seton Hall is not a great basketball school. Arizona is not a great basketball school. NC State agreed to be in this before they hired Will Wade when they were not a very good basketball school. So we'll see if they look better. But those events are struggling. They're struggling to net the kind of teams that they need to net in order to continue to function and survive. They rely on ticket sales. They rely on TV and media rights, and they're not going to get that if teams like Western Kentucky and South Florida are in these events. It's just not going to happen for them. And now next year, there's going to be, 14 more teams? And they're not going to invite a bunch of bad teams. There's going to be 14 more high-profile good teams in this Players Era Festival. So to me, the the traditional multi-team events, Battle for Atlantis, ESPN Events Invitational, formerly known as the Old Spice Classic, again, Maui, Battle for Atlantis, they're circling drain. They're circling the drain. And this announcement that this thing's going to be 32 teams they're on life support. Like, there's not really any other way to put it. They're on life support. The college basketball scheduling moving from 31 games to 32 games will help. It will help, but it is a very small fix for what I think is ultimately kind of just delaying the inevitable there. Now, in terms of the Players Era Festival, we don't know exactly how it's going to function. My suspicion with a 32-team field is that it'll be 2 16-team brackets. Every team's going to get 3 games. Your 16-team bracket, you'll bracket them out 1 through 8. So 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5, and then again, assuming your winners, your favorites win, then 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3 on day 2, and then 1 plays 2 for the championship, and then you have a champion on that 16-team bracket. You would then have another champion on the other side of that bracket. I don't know if you would then have them play each other. You could, in theory, have wherever you finish on your 16-team bracket, you add a 4th game and you play the same team on the other side who finished in the same spot. That might be kind of fun if teams are willing to agree to play a 4th game. Or if you could just say, hey, if you win the first 3 games, you're going to then play a 4th game to determine the actual winner. That might be tough logistically, schedule-wise. Nobody wants to play 4 games in 4 days. And certainly you can't. All 32 teams can't leave a certain day open in their calendar. So I'm not sure how that would work. The other obvious solution is that both winners get the extra $1 million. If you win this bracket versus this bracket, either way, you get the $1 million. This event is already shelling out $33 million because they're selling out $1 million for each of the 32 teams and an additional $1 million for the team that wins. If you can spend $33 million in this event, you can probably spend $34 million on this event. So I think that might be the way that it goes. But again, we'll find out more when it gets closer to the deadline for that event to kind of figure out exactly how it's going to work logistically. But it's another thing that is a dramatic change in the space of college basketball. And we're watching things kind of that have been traditionally stalwarts in the college hoop space sort of start to go by the wayside as money has full on infiltrated the sport for better or for worse at this point in college hoops. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Got a fun guest lined up for you all to record on Monday, so that show will go out on Tuesday. We'll, of course, keep you up to date on the injury for Mario Saint-Supery, keep you up to date on more recruiting news and any updates we get on Tyon Grant-Foster as well. Thanks again, folks, for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And, of course, as always, go Zags.